tweede lezing op dit congres over Normative Professionalisering, over ethics works. Dat is een lezing van Dr. Harry Kunneman, professor Dr. Kunneman van de UVH. En zijn lezing heeft als titel Professional Ethics and Normative Professionalization Towards a Critical Dialogue.
I want to present some ideas to you which I've been working on recently and which are very much work in progress, and which this afternoon stimulated me to dare to present. I'm going to talk about the emerging paradigm of normative professionalization, and I hope I can elucidate what this paradigm, between quotes, means by developing a critical dialogue with two of my companions. Sarah Banks is a very recent companion, but I'm very glad I've been brought in touch with your work and ideas by Leah and by her group. It's clear that we have a shared commitment to clarify the ethical roots and the moral horizon of social work and new forms of supporting research that supports professionals doing ethics work in practice. And there are, of course, very clear affinities between, their approach and what we have been doing here at the University of Humanistic Studies under the banner of normative professionalization. I point to some obvious similarities. Of course, the attention for reflexivity, the attention for dialogue, the personal commitment of workers, rich narratives as important source of insight, and of course an explicit moral and political horizon, both for social work itself and for research on social work and on to the ethics of professionals. And above all, I think ethics work is a very felicitous concept. I'm very glad you coined it, Sarah. It's a new concept referring to the complex and dedicated effort, the continuous effort required from social workers and of course others to do justice to the ethical questions and challenges internally connected with good social work. To do good social work, you have to do ethics work. I think this is a very deep and important thought, especially because this is situated in organizational surroundings that don't have much time and appetite for the slow questions, the slow personal, existential and moral questions that underlie and stimulate and make necessary this ethics work. So this concept will be at the heart of my talk and at the heart of my effort to weave connections between the approach of Sarah and normative professionalization. And this is not that difficult to me because 1.5 years ago we coined the idea of waardenwerk, values work in Dutch. And we even started a new journal with this title. So I can easily relate to the idea of ethics work and the felicitated combination of ethics and work. And moreover, the idea resonates strongly with my efforts to analyze the time we are living in as the second postmodernity and the spread of horizontal forms of morality no longer being dependent upon, but also no longer being supported by pre-given sources of morality, be this God or the destiny of mankind or the cunning of reason or the proletariat or whatever. So there's work needed to articulate the values which deeply touch us. Well, this is a little bit of narcissism, but okay. Last number of Waardenwerk, which you of course all have subscribed to already. A beautiful theme on Habermas, on the work of Frans de Waal, on ethics work in care and social work, on ethics work in organizations surrounding violence and on humanistic counseling. So this is a journal which is completely dedicated to the theory and practice of ethics work. Well, I think it's clear, and it's very encouraging to find in Sarah Beck's a companion who is looking in the same direction. It's clear that in the context of personal relations, there also, and in the context of professional work, we need ethical orientation and we need an open moral horizon, but they can no longer be founded on high ground forms of morality. And you could also reformulate this, that both the idea of neoliberal individualism and the idea of community as moral foundations for our relations are no longer practical. So we require contextualized and embodied reflexive work involving, as Sarah has underlined this morning, empathic commitment and dialogical friction, both at the interpsychic and at the relational level. And this is a combination which I'm going to delve into, because I think this is crucial to see that this work is both interpsychic at the level of our own soul, our own body, our own heart, our own feelings, our own emotions, our own wishes and fears, and the concomitant relational dynamics. Moreover, and this is of course a very important point, this is not a kind of narcissistic staring into the mirror of our psyche. It is related to concrete challenges and moral problems connected with messy problems of clients. Most of our clients are deeply in trouble. And our ethical reflexivity and our ethics work is related to doing good work for them and with them. Messy problems of clients, which are then of course also messy problems for ourselves against the moral horizon of a more just society. So these are the strong resonances which I would like to elaborate. But there are also, I think, interesting and possibly fruitful differences. And this is what the rest of my talk is going to be about. And if you allow me, this is not symbolic, this is purely thermic. But it's very warm here. I think the shared ideas and insights merit much more careful elaboration than I've done just now, and I'm going to do it, and we are going to do it here. But for today, for the dialogue, I'm going to make the differences somewhat bigger to stimulate the discussion and the dialogue. And I want to present three possibly fruitful differences. The first is that normative professionalization, the theory and the practice work, aims to connect different levels. We do research into specific domains of professional action, social work, care, police force, but also corporate social responsibility and other. And we try to do good empirical work there and conceptual work, but we also try to identify shared problematics, shared challenges, and shared resources in a broad range of professional domains. So we have this constant interweaving between specific domains, such as social work on the one hand, or the police on the one hand, and general patterns in different professional domains on the other hand. And it's really surprising and I think encouraging how deep the similarities are between the ethical challenges and the moral challenges, for example, in the police force or in education or in social work or in corporate social responsibility. This is one of the discoveries of our research during the past 10 years, that indeed there are patterns there which merit a specific conceptual and empirical articulation. And this last point is very important for me because this also has a practical dimension. We experience, and I experience in the different organizations where I work and where I come, that all these people are mostly working on their own. Social workers are struggling with their ethical dilemmas. The police force is struggling with its own ethical dilemmas. educators are struggling with their own ethical dilemmas. And I think they can learn from each other, they can support each other, they have to say something to each other, and they can encourage each other. So this is a very important element of the practice of normative professionalization, developing new networks which can really make a difference, and which connect civil society with professional society, as it's called here, and I'll come back to that concept. The second possibly interesting difference is, and a very important and fascinating one for me personally, is connected with the search for a new horizontal epistemology. In this sense, we are quite immodest. We think that in these different professional practices, a new epistemology is emerging, which is of the utmost importance for research into and legitimizing the importance of ethics work in these professional practices. So I've just put some nice sounding concepts here. Epistemology and methodologies that are scientifically sound and respectable, that are complexity sensitive, and that are practice oriented. And the first part is very important for me because I see in many forms of research into ethics work in professional contexts a kind of defensive attitude. We do qualitative narrative research which is ethically sensitive, and this is something completely different from the hard research from science, etc. We are oppressed by science, they are our enemies, and we do something much more complex and much more important, but which cannot be presented for a hard scientific forum. And I think here it is important and possible, as I will argue, to be much more immodest there and to argue that we are doing the kind of hard science that is needed in our time. And a lot of scientific research is in fact extremely soft because it's only situated at the high ground and avoids all complex ethical, moral and political problems. And in this sense is extremely soft. So I would very much like to play with this hard and soft opposition. And of course this is a fascinating but also complex task because we are still faced with these deeply ingrained oppositions, facts and values, causality and free will, objectivity and subjectivity, natural sciences, humanities, the universally valid and the particular. All these oppositions are related, as Foucault has demonstrated very clearly, I think, with forms of governance, with subtle forms of vertical power relations in which truth and power are internally related. And I think there is a lot of movement, a lot of research, a lot of thinking going on during the last 20 years, which is getting stronger, which helps us to overcome these oppositions from two avenues. The one within the sciences themselves. I repeat this over and over, but it gives me so much encouragement that this is really happening in our times. In relational biology, in critical complexity thinking, new developments are taking place which bridge the gap between the science and the humanities and make fruitful connections with critical hermeneutics possible. In the second place, by complementing, I don't know whether this is the most precise concept, but okay, complementing the dominant focus on high ground problems and on reductionist methodologies by systematic attention for messy problems. And this is crucial. There are very many unsolvable problems which are resistant to forms of reductionist, evidence-oriented research, and which cost a lot of money, which are connected with real problems and challenges of organizations and between organizations, of professionals and between professionals, and of course of clients. So messy problems in swampy conditions and the fact that to deal adequately with swampy and messy problems, we need also ethical and moral resources. And this is for me an extremely important point, because this means that the whole position of ethics and morality in our society is changing. This is not only something for the civil society and for high ideals for our future. This is something which we need to do good work. We need ethical and moral resources to do good work. And this also has an economic and bureaucratic and governmental significance. And the third point then is that along these lines, and I think here we are clearly related also, but maybe this is a little bit more immodest, internally connected with a long-term political perspective, and not with a short-term political perspective, with a long-term political perspective, which is not only aiming to reclaim ethics, as Sarah said this morning, from managerial ethics and neoliberal values. I think this is vitally important. She's completely right. And she's leading the way here in this reclaiming operation. But I think there's also something else at stake, pointing beyond the dominant economic and cultural and epistemological structure of neoliberal modernity. And this is for me a crucial point for thinking about social work in our days. What is the meaning of social in our times? And is the social can it still be articulated only or primarily in terms of a more just distribution of resources to function in a neoliberal society? Is this what we work for? Is this the social? Or is there a wider and more radical notion of the social in our times developing? And I think that professional practices and organizations can be thought of both as political arenas where this wider political perspective is at stake, and as workshops and laboratories for connecting existential values, existential ethics and moral values by way of good work and by way of horizontal cooperation in relation to messy problems in swampy conditions. And this is of course a lot of blah blah at the surface, but underneath there are some real thoughts. So there is struggle there, it's an arena, there are real power struggles there, there is domination, there is submission, but, and the two are connected, we can try to fight this struggle from the kind of meaningful work which can be done by restructuring our work as workshops and laboratories for developing and experiencing these connections between what gives meaning and color to our own life, what helps, what contributes to a more just society, and doing this in the form of good work, thinking, talking, dialoguing about good work and doing this. And I think these workshops and these laboratories and what can be experienced, they point beyond neoliberal individualism and consumptive capitalism. Because we further concrete experiences in these laboratories, these workshops, and develop rich narratives which can articulate these experiences. And they can help us to affirm, to stand for, and believe in, and hope for a richer, a more fulfilled life. And this is a heavy concept, but I think very important. One of my friends and colleagues, Adriaan Beckman, I had an interesting conversation a few weeks ago about his new book. And then he said, yeah, well, of course, we have all these polls and all these research into happiness, and into the happiness coefficient, into national happiness and international comparisons, etc. And many people, when asked, say, I'm quite happy. But then he say, when you put another question, then they are going to hesitate. They don't have an easy answer. This, do you have a fulfilled life? Is your life fulfilled? This is something else than happiness. A fulfilled life can have long streaks or strong elements of unhappiness, of unease, of struggle, of disappointments, and still it can develop into a fulfilled life, a more fulfilled life. And I think this is the political perspective which I would like to present as the horizon of normative professionalization based on fruitful interactions between civil society and professional society, based on interactions between the moral resources and the old, rich narratives and the political energies contained in civil society on the one hand, with good work and with ethics work in professional societies on the other hand. And my hope is that this can help us to liberate us a little bit from the phantasm of unending economic growth, and the concomitant ideas of consumptive distributive justice, that what we distribute justly is in the end possibilities to consume now much less than others. This is, I think, a modern, a 20th century idea of justice, and we are struggling for, but also touching on, I think, new political horizons. And these are opened by two decisive questions. What form of richness do we want to distribute more justly? What is the richness that we distribute more justly? And could it be that there is material richness at the high places in our society and material poverty at the low places in society, but there could be ethical richness in these low places and ethical poverty in the high places? And the second decisive question is, of course, what kind of work and what kind of knowledge are needed to bring forth that richness? So there is an inner connection here, which I will try to elaborate further in the rest of my talk. Are you still with me, or have I lost you already? Okay. That's good. Well, this is more or less my comfort zone. I can talk about this for hours quite easily. But now I'm getting into something more hesitant or more provisional or more very much work in progress, which I would like to present to you. I would like to do two things. Clarify somewhat further the idea of ethics work, going deeper into it, and the related idea of waardewerk, especially two of the dimensions in the beautiful analytic list of Sarah, emotion work and identity work. I think these are the core. If you don't work there, then the rest is going nowhere. Would be my suggestion. So I'm going to try to get something deeper into these two, and then based on that, or building on that, elucidating some, luckily not all, characteristics of a horizontal epistemology that can include existential insights and moral values, and moral perspective emerging from emotion work and identity work into the knowledge base of professional work. And this is a very strong and, I think, important idea, that we need an epistemology that does not exclude ethical insights and moral perspectives, but includes them in the knowledge base of social work and of other protections. The knowledge we develop and which makes it possible for us to do good professional work is also of an ethical and moral nature. And when we say knowledge here, it means that we can learn something there, that there are forms of work and ways to do it which can be evaluated as more or less fruitful, for which we have a kind of critical dialogue which is comparable to the critical dialogue on theories and on empirical work, which only wants to bring patterns and regularities to the fore. So I start with the first pointer. Emotion work and identity work as central components of ethics work in professional contexts. And this is a point which I'm maybe overemphasizing, but which I think is worth repeating, due to the relational character and the moral horizon of both care and social work. We are very much tempted to foreground empathy, care, solidarity, and related qualities and virtues, but we have comparatively little texts and concepts and ideas and research with regard to indifference, with regard to aggression, and with regard to hostility. We don't have an ethics of hostility, we do have an ethics of care. We don't have an ethics of aggression, we do have the normative professionalization in this empathic sense. And I think this is a lacuna which we have to remedy, especially because working through the Freudian concept, which is still very much alive today, working through indifference, aggression, and hostility, both our own indifference and aggression, hostility, and that of others, is, I think, an essential part of emotion work and identity work. And this goes especially for care and social work. Armin is not leaving in anger or aggression, he saw me, but he has to leave to take a train to Köln. Have a good trip, Armin. Which is a pity, because it would illustrate something of this dynamic. But no, it's empathic and so on. Yeah. Well, of course, this goes especially for our kind of professional domain. In care and in social work, professionals are confronted with the human suffering resulting from somatic, relational, and interpsychic violence. Lots of our clients in both care, in the GGZ, in Jouwscare, in hospitals, suffer from forms of physical violence, from forms of relational violence, and from forms of interpsychic violence, of condemning yourself, finding yourself worthless, being depressive, etc. So the consequences of violence are a central theme in care and social work, and this goes also for the suffering resulting from bureaucratic indifference and from economic hierarchies. So we are both confronted with all relational forms of violence and with the forms of suffering resulting from bureaucratic indifference and from economic hierarchies. And the question is, how do we relate to them? What is our responsibility with regard to these? And I want to get somewhat deeper in there, looking for an ethics and looking for a idea of ethics work which addresses both sides, which not only addresses empathy and solidarity, but also addresses aggression and indifference, and spreads the work justly over these two. And this is of course, a central element of the idea of horizontal morality, and I would like to go something deeper into ideas of de Waal and Benjamin, and a little bit Paul Ricoeur, which helped me very much to think about these problematics. And this is my central idea or intuition or mantra, to reframe or frame ethics work at the level of emotions and identities as working through a fundamental and recurrent, ever newly emerging tension between two poles of identities and two concomitant relational patterns. I think these two are completely connected with each other, poles of identities and emotions connected with them on the one hand, and relational patterns on the other hand, and I designate these as autopoiesis and diapoiesis, also in an effort to create new conceptual space beyond the opposition between egoism and altruism. The worn and I think misleading opposition between egoism and altruism, and the related Christian and humanist opposition between good and bad. So these concepts are meant to create some new conceptual space in which to rethink the hierarchical relation between the good altruistic and the bad egoistic tendencies and relations and emotions. A horizontal relation between autopoiesis and diapoiesis. And my first friend, which I call to the fore as a witness, are Humberto Maturana and Francisca Varela in their very influential and very interesting and also deeply misleading book, The Tree of Knowledge, where they introduced the notion of autopoiesis. And this goes back to the first cells. So part of this whole operation is also developing a ethical and moral perspective which is no longer based on the opposition between man and culture on the one hand and nature on the other hand, but which is able to see the deep continuities between ourselves as life forms and other life forms. And they say from the first cells onward, life and all forms of life are characterized by autopoiesis, the ongoing active self-construction. And this is done by constructing recurring, ever-renewed system-environment demarcations. This is me, this is the environment. Here's my brain, and I guard off, I ward off some influences, and others I let in, and this helps me to reproduce and to survive. So system-environment demarcations and the perpetuation of demarcation, including genetic copies of oneself, self-preservation in this double sense. And autopoietic self-preservation is not only the struggle for life, is not only nature red in tooth and claw, but also all forms of strategic exchange and cooperation which have developed in the course of evolution, but where the point of reference is always the self as the system, the autonomy of a system and its reproduction. And then this is a picture of Tom, my grandchild, which is now 7 months old, is lying on my lap, and I have this on my computer screen, and every morning when I put it on, I smile, and I say, "Hello, Tom." And well, he elicits all kinds of caring emotions in me. And this is the second element of the tension. In the course of the evolution of life on Earth, more complex patterns of interaction emerged, especially in the context of caring, of parental caring, between parents and their offspring, as de Waal has analyzed, but also in the context of interaction between social animals, social mammals, who are mutually dependent and form a higher self, a higher autos. Elephants, dolphins, primates, and the like. It's only very recently that we are discovering how much we are like the primates and how much we are like the elephants. One of the interesting stories of which one of the favorites of Frans de Waal is that for a long time it was thought that elephants are quite stupid animals because they cannot recognize themselves in mirrors, which is a very important indication of identity and intelligence. But then he said, yeah, what they did was taking a human mirror, a little bit bigger, 1 by 1 meter, and then the elephants, well, they couldn't see themselves in such a small mirror. And then they concluded elephants are stupid animals. And so it has taken a very long time before they constructed a big mirror and devised experiments in which elephants could show that they are very intelligent and very caring and very emotionally deep experiencing animals just like us. So, this is one of my mantras, de Waal's 2 scripts, 2 basic emotional scripts. These are poles where all kinds of emotions are clustered, and 2 concomitant relational patterns. The aggressive chimps and their hierarchical social structures on the one hand, and on the other hand, the eroticized, caring bonobos. This is an interesting observation also, that all kinds of behavioral researchers of the bonobos never have seen that this is a matriarchal society. This couldn't be, so they only saw a patriarchal society. And on the second hand, they didn't see that bonobos are fucking all the time. So, because this was also incredible or improbable. So, you see your paradigm. You see your paradigm. De Waal and others have related more closely to the bonobos and have unearthed their erotic and caring relations. So from this follows a first provisional conclusion. We combine 2 basic conflictual emotional scripts and 2 conflictual relational patterns. And I would say that ethics work has to do with this conflict and with working through this conflict. On the one hand, autopoiesis, connoted with self-preservation, with power struggles, with competition for scarce resources, and the hierarchical social structures resulting from this competition. And on the other hand, diapoiesis, which is a combination of dialogue and poiesis. I took the poiesis of autopoiesis and combined it with dialogue, all kinds of dialogical relations, caring for others, dialogical forms of communication, and reciprocal, mutually welcomed forms of cooperation and play. So the dialogue is distributed over different forms of relating to others, from care to dialogical communication, to cooperation, to play, and maybe also aesthetic creation. And then in the second step, and now I think it gets to be interesting, this can be refined with the help of ideas from Jessica Benjamin, because now we can reframe autopoiesis as a continuum between 2 poles, 2 different forms of autopoiesis, which are both constituted by, as she says, intrapsychic constructions of others that destroy their separateness, their being different, and assimilate them to our own autos. And then we get autopoiesis with a small a and autopoiesis with a big A. And with a small a refers then to omnipotence, and as defined by Benjamin and others, the interpsychic and relational subjugation of others to our own wishes, desires, ideas, fears, anxieties, and the resulting open or latent struggles, victories and defeats. And in her later work, Benjamin has introduced the notion of two-ness for this pattern. There are 2 and they are struggling. And the reality of the one does not connect with the reality of the other. Maybe you can recognize this. I certainly can from really hard fights with your partner or with your father or mother or whatever. I have this emotional state and you do not respect or recognize it, and your idea, your reality cannot exist. Only my reality can exist. There is no connection between the 2. If the one is right, the other is wrong. So there's only struggle or hierarchy possible in the 2-ness. On the other hand, and this is, I think, an important addition, which helps to clarify the kind of ethics work needed in social work, because autopoiesis with a big A is the other pole and refers to identification or submission to an almighty other. So it's not my own autos is small, but you, my father, or the Führer, or Putin, or my social worker, or my therapist, or my professor, he is big or she is big. And by identifying with him or her, and I will be safe. The other will protect me against dangers and take care of all my problems. And this is designated by Benjamin as oneness, as fusion. And this is also a way to do away with differences, to do away with the different reality of our wishes, desires, and possibilities, to annihilate difference. So this can be as autopoietic struggle, and this can be done with identification and oneness. Ooh, I'm going to get time problems. Okay, I just skipped a half at the end. Along these lines, then diapoiesis can be recast as a third position. And this is also a concept from Benjamin, thirdness. And thirdness then refers to a third form of poiesis, allowing to resist the strong and deeply rooted pull towards either autopoiesis or autopoiesis with a big A. So then we have this continuum and the two poles, the two autopoietic poles, and then there is a third position, an in-between position, which enables us to resist the pull towards either the struggle and the hierarchy or the submission and the oneness. And this is a space and an interpsychic and relational reality that only emerges on the basis of co-creation, both dialogical and containing co-creation. So you cannot do this on your own. This is not autopoietically feasible. This is can only be done by diapoiesis, by a relation in which both contribute to the emergence of this thirdness and the space in which difference can be both real and non-threatening. And this is one of the formulations of Benjamin, which I like very much, that your difference does not embody a threat for me, and that I can even enjoy it or be glad with it. So my first suggestion is then that ethics work at the level of emotions and relations primarily concerns reaching out to this third position. This is the hard work. This is the work that has to be done. And this is resisting this pull, both intrapsychic and relational and professional. And this third position, which I think directly relates to what Ricoeur tries to describe as the ipsa identity, which only emerges on the basis of co-creation. And then I suggest, and this is a new and wild idea, but the longer I ponder it, the more I like it, that this is a basic pattern which repeats itself, which is a fractal, which repeats itself at different levels, in different forms, but with basically the same dialectic structure. At the level of our emotions, at the level of our relations, at the level of in-group relations, at the level of relations between groups, at the level of organizations, in organizations, and between organizations, at the level of systems, and last but not least, at the level of ecological relations with other living beings. And this means that ethics work is getting more important because it's at stake at all these levels, but also that when we have deficiencies at one level, other levels can come to the help. Or when it's going very well at one level, other levels can completely destroy it. So we're going both, we now have both a pattern on the emotional relational level and a repetition of that on different levels in our society. And in this way, I think it becomes possible to connect ethics and morality and politics more closely. Well, I have a very interesting second pointer, but I think I've talked already too long, so I will save this for the PowerPoint you get. One little hint then, because this is really such a fascinating idea. I have borrowed this from Jablonka, evolution in 4 dimensions, and this is part of these new developments within the sciences themselves, where these oppositions are being bridged. And one of the core ideas there is to think in terms of what I would say dynamic diagrams. So we have, of course, all these analytic diagrams with schemes and boxes and circles and describing and analyzing patterns and relations. But I think ethics work is also historical. It's related with our own biography, with the development of our own life story, and it's related with evolutionary developmental processes in our surroundings, in our organizations, etc. And it's related to bigger developmental processes at the level of our society. So I think we also have to start to learn thinking in dynamic diagrams which can picture dynamics at different levels. And this is a diagram picturing an evolutionary process. So this is a system, let's say a bird, and it's developing in the course of its life, and the genetic transmission of its information is developing. There is evolution at the level of the species, and these are different ways of development, different paths, different routes of development, and there are attractors involved. And then Wellington, who has developed it first, pictures this second level where we look from under to these pathways. So this pathway is, I think, this one, or this one. So what it's going like this there is going like this here. And then he says, so here we have all these genes which are anchor points, and they are related with dynamic bands which pull with different force and thus make discourse or discourse or discourse more probable in time. And this is a dynamic network. And if we cut one here and one there and one there, something changes in these courses. And then we picture another level above. For example, let's say this is development at an individual life or of a relation, and then we picture a level of social circumstances, of distribution of resources. And then we get this kind of network, but then going down and pulling or pushing. And then we get changes at the different levels, influencing each other and influencing the course of development. And this is a very simple diagram. There's only one attractor, and it's going down. But suppose we have another attractor, a strong magnet also. So, and then we can start thinking about attractors in dynamic systems and a whole network of causal influences, including our narratives, including our personal ethical words, influencing these developments on the level of our emotions, on the level of our relations, on the level of our work and our organizations. And I suggest that we should not stop doing narrative and qualitative work, but also invest in working with more complex scientific models, dynamic diagramming, in which we can develop multi-level analysis of the multi-level and complex processes in our beautiful and interesting work. And I wish you a lot of fun and a lot of perseverance in developing this. Thank you.
There's some time for questions, I think.
I hope so.
You talked about ethical concepts of positive emotions. You said there is a lot of talking about positive and not so much about negative.
Yeah.
And what you said made me thinking, because I noticed, yes, this is true. We talk a lot about care and etc. So I was wondering, where do you put the emotion of shame? Because I suddenly realized that when we talk about ethics, we seldom talk about shame. And as a human being, I think shame is a very important ethical emotion. So I was wondering, where do you put it? Is it a positive? Because shame you can consider this as positive?
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is a fascinating question. One of my guides here is Damasio, and his analysis of emotions and feelings, and he suggests that our evolutionary heritage gives us a limited range of basic emotions, and then an ever more complex tree and branches of feelings, social feelings, and even more complex feelings. And shame, I think, is a higher level feeling, a complex feeling, which in my analysis can be both at one of the autopoietic poles. I am ashamed because I didn't defeat my enemy, or I am ashamed because my father is angry on me. These are both autopoietic articulations of the same feeling, shame. But it can also be connected with this diapoietic relation, where I feel ashamed that I wasn't be able to be true to you, or where I feel ashamed. So I think that beyond Damasio and his neurobiological analysis, it would be very interesting to try and use this kind of ethics work analysis and this tension between these poles and the idea of threeness to position feelings and their different color or different consequences in this conceptual space. Does that help or not at all?
I have to think about it.
Good.
How to deal with the lack of causality in very complex situations, because it's very difficult to see that things are, well, you can see that there are causal relations, but it's very hard to define them because it's very complex.
Yeah. Well, this is what I left out. One of the very, for me, encouraging developments in relational biology and complexity theory is the reinvention of Aristotle and his four forms of causality. And Robert Rosen, a very famous and controversial biologist, has done the most work of it. So we then can think about different forms of causality, material and efficient causality, and this is the kind of causality which underlies evidence-based science. And so there are causal forces which are determinate and recurrent and which form patterns and universal laws, etc. And then Rosen and of course Maitreya and others say, now there's also formal causality, and this is connected with autopoiesis, with living beings creating and co-creating worlds. And then there is final causality, and I add this is not Rosen, which has specific kind of models, narratives, and moral horizons. And then you can again look at such kind of picture, and then we are going to color these bands. What type of causality is working here? Is this a recurrent universal pattern, mechanical pattern, or is this a richer narrative which pulls or which pulls up? So, and this is in fact a very simple but important idea that ethics work itself is a causal force in professional context. When you do it, it makes a difference for when you don't. And we all know that the higher we get in the hierarchies, the lesser the ethics work becomes, and the simpler the ethical schemes, and the simpler the final causes which are narrated there. So I think this is a way not to say we have causality and this is big science, and then we have freedom and this is us, this is ethics, but thinking about different types of causalities and ourselves and our own ethics work and relational work as a causal influence in good work and bad work. And then there is a connection between different forms of models. You need narratives to model ethical relations. And your own life history is the model of your own development. And you share your life stories with others. So, yeah, something like that.
You need a different way of thinking of all levels.
Yeah, absolutely. But this is another epistemological paradigm. It really is another take at epistemology.
Yeah.
Beyond the positivism and beyond mechanical dialectics and beyond the particularistic hermeneutics. It's not putting ourselves only in the camp of the narratives and the understanding but being relating to what is shifting in the sciences themselves. This is not just fantasy. A lot of scientific work is being done, which helps us, which we can relate to, and in name of which we can criticize all those stupidly simple schemes which dominate our work, which dominate our organizations. They are very unscientific. They are very much 20th century in their lack of complexity.
People still wonder.
Absolutely,
Still
absolutely.
want these simple schemes,
Yeah.
because then they understand the world and say,
Yeah.
okay, I have a solution and I have something.
Absolutely. And it sells, yeah. Wilder sells also. Yeah.
Talking about ethics is not that what they want to hear very often.
Yeah, but that's changing. That's changing. I think when you look at the resonance of Sarah Banks' work the last 15 years, then I think it's resonating much more strongly than say 15 or 20 years ago. And I think you've been doing the same things all the time. And no, but I mean not on the level of content, but on the level of agenda, on the level of what questions we should address. So, yeah. Yeah, please.
I like your idea of normative professionalization as a laboratory.
Yeah.
And obviously you've developed already magically the idea of ethics work and extended it more broadly in terms of a bigger sociological and philosophical picture. So I'm just thinking about sort of putting that back now, some of this textual, with the contours and the swampiness, back into the swampiness.
Yeah.
As to what that might do for a sort of program of further empirical work, where we should be looking now in the professions to do further empirical work to develop these ideas and to develop the professions and to change the world, which is your ambitious program in a way, in a sense.
Well, the world is changing itself, so. Yeah.
Challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
The consumptive capital,
Yeah.
etc.
Yeah. Well, for me, the decisive point is shifting the locus of research from universities and high schools to organizations and professional contexts themselves. Professionals who are researching their own practice together with clients and with others. So the reflexivity is not reserved for us, the scientists, but should be there in the organizations and in the professional practices themselves. So one of the biggest challenges for me is how can we export and adapt and reinvent the notion of research so that it's something which is an integral part of being a professional and being a good professional and doing good work and combined with all the critical potential and with the enriching of narratives which this can bring about. So we have now one of my PhD students wrote a beautiful book. Many people here know it, about the police force, and he's called Jan Nap, and he's been asking policemen at street level, can you give me stories about what is good police work, what's bad police work, and where you don't know. And he has collected these stories and commented on them and written them down, and they called it Jan Napper. We're going to Jan Nap. And now we are busy with, in cooperation with the police force, to install 20 places where policemen, under the guidance of someone who has a little bit of research expertise, are collecting and discussing stories about what is good police work, what bad police, and where they don't know, and trying to connect these. So enriching the stories organizations and professionals tell about themselves and their work by this kind of self-narratives and other narratives, and the empirical work going into it. And this, of course, is then rich material for us to reflect upon and to develop models and theories and concepts, etc. So there is one of the big problems of research is collecting your data, and when your clients are collecting their own data, this is really a very ideal configuration. So I always say to my PhD students, please let others do the research, and you do the data analysis and the reflection on it. So, okay, yeah. I think we have merited a drink.